Hi, this is Dalene with McDonald Sewing and Vacuum, and I'm going to show you all the wonderful sewing features that come with the Designer Brillance 80. This is a wonderful machine. It's one of our newer Husqvarna Viking machines. Okay, so I've got my bobbin ready to wind, and I'm going to show you I'm not going to actually unthread the machine. I have a metal foot, which is good, and I'm just going to make sure the thread runs under the foot. It's still threaded. I'm going to put the thread through the bobbin, through the center of the bobbin, and through the hole on the top. And I'm going to run it across, make sure it lines up on those bars. Those metal bars are there to protect your machine, to keep it from wearing a groove in your machine. Then there's a little guide right here. I put the bobbin down on top of the bobbin winding post, and then I flip the bobbin winding on, and I can just touch the screen to turn it on and off. I'm going to trim my thread there, make sure it's still lined up, which it's doing fine. And I don't really have to interrupt my sewing very much to wind a bobbin. It's much easier than it used to be. I love this feature. Okay, I'm not going to wind a full bobbin right now, and I can just pop that back over. It even comes with a little cutter right there, which is very handy in case you are like me and misplace your scissors a lot. Okay, so I'm going to put my bobbin back in, clicking to make sure that it's in the tension. The first place we're going to start is with the screen here. I've got a nice color screen. You can use it just like your tablet or your phone. It has the same touch capabilities. And when we're in sewing mode like we are right now, you can choose the type of fabric that you're working with and use the My Sewing Advisor, which is a wonderful way to manage your fabric. So I'm going to choose a woven medium just to give you an idea. And then I'm going to choose a seam right here as a basic technique. And then it sets everything up for me. It's got the tension set for me. It has the stitch length set to where I need it to be. And I'm all ready to go. I don't have to worry about things like tension and presser foot pressure and so on. I don't even have to put my foot down, lower the foot. With the foot control, I can just tap it and it puts the foot down for me. And then when I'm ready to sew, I can just go ahead and stitch. So I'm just sewing a straight stitch here. And I'm going to use the scissors that are right there with it to cut the thread. And there we've got a beautiful straight stitch. On the screen, what I didn't show you a moment ago, it tells you when you select your fabric and your stitch, it will show you what foot to use. So I have the A foot here. It will show what type of needle and what size of needle to use, so there's no guesswork there either. So it's really designed for ease of use. The next thing I want to show you is that when you've got a straight stitch like this, you can actually change the needle position. So right here, I'm going to touch on the screen. This is when when there's a straight stitch and there's no width to the stitch. I can touch the screen and it moves the needle over incrementally. We've got, I don't remember how many stitch positions, but you can go all the way over to the left and all the way over to the right. Right here on the screen, you can tell that it's not at the default setting when the number here is showing in turquoise. When I get back to the default setting, it will turn back to black. So there you go. You can always tell where you need to be. Now I'm going to just stitch a little bit. And I'm going to stop with the needle up and scooch over a little bit to the right. And you see how easy it is to change the needle position here? I just keep tapping until I have it where I want it. And sew a little bit more. And back to the default. And there you go. So it's very easy to align your stitches where you want them to be. And you can see how I was able to make those jumps. Other things that are available on this screen, the user's guide is right here available for you. You can either search by a topic, and you brings up a little keyboard, or you can go through an A to Z list, or you can look at the different chapters. So there's several ways to navigate through that. I'm going to go back to the Joy of Sewing Advisor, and this time I'm going to be working with this really stretchy tricot knit. It's very lightweight, very difficult to use, at least I would have thought so some years ago, before I got my first Viking. So I'm going to choose Stretch Light fabric, and once again I'm going to choose a seam. Now this time it actually sets up a slightly zigzag seam for me. It still says that I need the A foot, but this time it's telling me that I need a 75 stretch needle for best results. I'm not going to change the needle today, and you'll see I'll do just fine anyway. And what's nice is I didn't have to push or pull on that fabric at all. The machine fed it through beautifully, and I've got a nice stretchy stitch that's not going to pop the stitches when I put that on. So wonderful for garment sewing. Okay, the next thing I want to show you how easy it is to set up for denim. So I'm going to go back to the Joy of Sewing Advisor, and I just touched that sewing machine right up there. This time I'm going to select Woven Heavy, and I'm going to select a seam again, and it is telling me to, oops, I've got Woven Medium. I must not have pushed the right selection. Let's try Woven Heavy. There we go, and a seam. And this time it's telling me I need a B foot. It recommends a 90 needle, so I'm going to change the feet, and on this machine it's really easy to change the feet like on most Vikings. I just push from the back, and the current foot comes right off. I'm going to put it right there, and I'm going to pop the B foot in just like that, and ready to go. Again, I'm not going to change needles for this. And what I'm going to do right now is create a fake flat-filled seam. So I'm going to try to make it look like the seam that we often have going down the side of our jeans. And that's at least 3 layers. So when you're hemming someone's jeans, you end up having to go through 9 layers of denim. And the wonderful thing is that any of our Viking machines can do that. And the Brillance handles it brilliantly. Had to do that. Okay, so I have rolled up my rolled hem twice, and I now have 6 layers here that I'm dealing with. This time I'm going to activate the needle down position by pressing this button right here. It's just me trying to get that under there. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to be using this multi-purpose tool. It's also known as a clearance plate or button reed. I'm going to be using that to help me get over the hump. So here we go. That's 3 layers I'm going through, no problem again. Now as my foot starts to climb in the front, I'm going to take the narrow end of this and slide it under the foot in the back, so you can see it levels that out. And I'm going to continue to stitch across there. And wonderful, no problem, no skip stitches. I didn't break a needle. And I have a beautiful denim seam. It's a little hard to see those purple stitches on the dark blue, I know, but that works very easily. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is how to do a buttonhole with this machine. We're going to go back to our woven medium fabric, and I'm going to select the buttonhole. And what's really nice about this machine is that it brings you in context help. And so it's going to tell you here how to go about making a buttonhole. So one of the list of materials is right here, and the first thing it mentions is the sensor one-step buttonhole foot, and that's this foot right here. I'm going to take the B foot off, which is the one I just had on there. This one goes on just the same way. There's a metal bar there in the middle, and it slips onto the ankle just like that. And then in the back of the machine, there's a slot where that connector goes in, and I'm going to see if I can do it by feel. Yep, there we go. So I've got it connected now. What I can do right now, it shows me on the screen that there's a nice little ruler down here, both in millimeters, centimeters, and inches. And I need to measure my button in millimeters. Now you can switch to inches if you really prefer it, but most people end up switching back to millimeters and centimeters because we're more used to using that in sewing than we realize. Okay, so this button looks like it's about 19 millimeters, and right here on the screen where the button is and the 14, this is the size, so I can adjust that until I get 19 millimeters, and then it tells me that to go ahead and sew. But the nice thing here is we actually have a little video, and it's going to show you in a video. There's no words because they do this for many different languages around the world. So you put your interfacing in your fabric, you put the buttonhole foot on the way we did. You line up the white line with the little crown on the wheel, and I'll show you that in a minute. And then it shows you how it's going to stitch. It goes backwards first and then forwards each time. So there you go. If you weren't sure how to do it, you've got a little video just right there at your fingertips. And I'm going to just move that out of my way for right now. Okay, so as I mentioned, the machine is going to go backwards first. So you need to align your fabric in a way that, that will put the buttonhole where you want. So normally you would mark on your fabric where you want to line up your buttonhole. And the really most important thing right here is that you turn this wheel. There's a little white area on the wheel, on the left side of the wheel. You need to make sure that the white line here is lined up with that little white crown. And what I'm going to do is make sure that I'm lined up so that when it starts sewing, it's going to go backwards first. There we go. And then it comes forward. And then it goes to do the other side. The reason it does this is so that we get a perfectly symmetrical buttonhole. And it stops by itself when it's finished, and I can just use the scissors, trim that off, and there's my beautiful buttonhole. Just take a little seam ripper. Somebody taught me a trick a long time ago, putting a little needle right before the bar tack. Or not a needle, but you could use a needle, but use a pin there. Take your seam ripper and start at the bottom and just rip right through there. And the pin will keep you from going too far. There we go. I've got a perfect buttonhole for my button. And there's the button that it goes with. So that'll work just beautifully. So the next thing I want to show you is how to do an overcast, a seam and overcast at the same time. So we're going to go back to the Sewing Advisor. And this time I'm going to be using sweatshirt material and some ribbing. So it's knit or stretch. And I'm going to call it stretch medium. And then we're going to do the seam and overcast step there. Okay, and so once again, it's showing me what that's going to do. This is very simple, so there's just the one screen. And I need to change my foot back to the B foot. So I just pull that one off, put the B foot back on, and put my thread through the foot and pull it toward the back. That's always going to provide the best results if you keep your thread pulled toward the back that way. Okay, so I'm going to pretend that we're sewing ribbing onto a sweatshirt sleeve here. And I'm going to line my fabric up with my ribbing so that it's right kind of between the two red lines on the right there, and start sewing. And what it's going to do is sew a seam and finish the edge all at the same time. And if I stop with my needle down, it won't slip around on me while I adjust this. There we go. And then I can finish it. I don't have to, again, I don't have to push or pull or feed my fabric through it all. The machine does it beautifully. It's really powerful, so sometimes it's making my table shake. Okay, and then I cut my scissors. There's a beautiful seam. Flip it up, and a really nice professional looking seam and overcast. That's about as close as you can get to a serger without having a serger. Okay, and then in the basic sewing mode, I've got one more thing I want to show you. So I'm going to go back to the Joy of Sewing Advisor, and I'm going to show you how to do a blind hem. This is another one of those things where the video is very helpful. So I need to change my fabric too. I'm going to go back to woven medium, and we'll try that again. There we go. That's looking more like the blind hem I want to make. It shows you the list of materials that you need, and we need the blind hem foot D. So I'm going to get in here and grab the D foot, take the B foot off, and that goes on just like the other feet. I'm going to take my thread through the foot and to the back. And now I'm going to fold up my hem. And the nice thing here is that if you forget how to fold it, how to make the fold, there's a nice little video here that shows you how to do that. So it's a really great feature on this machine. Okay, I'm going to get that out of my way now, and I'm going to go ahead and sew. Now what I want to do is make sure this fold is lined up right closely to this D foot on the right side of the D foot. And I like to use the needle down position on this. And I'm just going to start sewing. It's going to sew stitches in the hem and reach over and grab just a bit of the fabric if I have it lined up right to make that hem. And it makes a nice blind hem if you do it well. It does take a little practice if you haven't done it for a while. So I know I didn't catch all of them stitches, so I only caught a couple actually. So why don't I just do that again? I was too busy talking to pay attention. So I'm going to stitch it one more time. Like I said, it's a good idea to practice this before you do it on the real thing. Now I caught more of them that time. And so I've sewed my seam back here, and you can't even see that bright purple on the front in the few places where I've done it. So blind hem, it's a really wonderful thing to know how to do, not to have to do it by hand anymore. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the Joy of Sewing Advisor. I want to show you a couple of other things that are in here in the screen before we go on to decorative sewing. There is a section on quilting, and it will show you how to do straight stitch quilting, stitch in the ditch, and quilt designs. There's also some help on free motion quilting, and we'll do a little bit of that later. And then also the embroidery menu is available here. The first thing I want to do in decorative sewing, an applique. So I'm going to be working with woven medium fabric. I've got some stabilizer to put on the back, still with woven medium, but this time instead of using a basic technique, I could come in here and look for applique, which I don't see, but there are other things in here like dimensional stitches, collars, and so on that I haven't shown you. But for right now, we're going to go on, I'm going to touch Start New. So I've got my woven medium. For right now, it's recommending the A foot for me, but I have a feeling that's going to change. I'm going to go to Menu B, and this menu is called Applique Stitches. So all of these, any of these stitches could be used for applique. I'm going to choose stitch number 4, which a lot of people call a blanket stitch. Some people call it an E-stitch. And it is telling me I should use the A foot with an 80 needle. And then this little picture right here, icon there, means that you should use stabilizer with this. So I'm going to grab the A foot, and you know what? Sometimes you know more, you have to tell the machine more than, or sometimes I think I do know more than the machine. I'm going to use the B foot because the B foot has some additional markings on it that I like to use for applique. So in this case, I'm overriding the machine's choice, and that is always up to you. So what I like to do is, on my applique, I like to line up the applique square, the edge of the applique, with the red line in the center of the B foot right there. So that way I know my stitch is going to be centered right over the applique. So I'm going to go ahead and start sewing here, and I also like to use the needle down position for this too. For applique especially, what's wonderful is that the needle, it stops with the needle down and it lifts the foot up a little bit so that you can change directions. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch down the side of this applique. And when I get close to the end, what I like to do is go, and I keep going until this next edge of the applique lines up with this red line right here on the B foot. So this is why I wanted to use this foot. Now when it does, I like to stop with the needle down and to the right. Then I can turn the fabric and I'm lined up perfectly for that. Actually on this one, I think I would actually make the stitch just a little bit longer. And again, with applique, it's always good to practice on a scrap before you try to do the real thing. Okay, I'm going to raise my needle up because I'm going to change stitches here. I want to show you that you can use other stitches for this. Here we've got a beautiful set of heirloom stitches, and one that I like to use is this little heart and chain. So it's a little bit of satin stitch and a little bit of and a couple of stitches connecting, and I'm not quite where I want to be. Whoops. Lift my foot up too. I'm going to move that over just a little bit. Put my needle down. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch to the end of this block, just like I did before. Normally when I do applique, I have a fusible interfacing on the back, or fusible web, where I can fuse it afterwards to the fabric underneath. Okay, so now I'm getting close to the edge. I'm going to stop in the same position with the needle down and to the right. And I think this just makes a nice, neater turn when we do that. I'm also going to restart my stitch. So it's going to start at the beginning of the stitch instead of in the middle. And we're going to stitch over that section there. To do the restart, there was actually a button right here that I pushed that will take the stitch right back to the beginning. And you can see, I'll show you why I wanted to do that. So here you can see I've got a beautiful little heart that starts at the beginning on that corner instead of just a partial heart. So that's why I did the stitch restart. So that's what you can do with applique. There are lots of stitches you can play with and have fun and make it beautiful. Another type of stitch that is available on this machine is the automatic tapering stitches. And menu D is some quilt stitches. Menu E, we have crafting stitches. J are some scallop stitches. There's some just really wonderful stitches here. And I believe it's Q menu. Yeah, so the menu Q is our decorative tapering stitches. I'm just going to select stitch number 1, which is a pretty wide satin stitch. It's recommending the B foot for me. But when I select a stitch on this menu, I get a new tab right here. And this is my tapering menu. What I can do here is select how the beginning taper, how it's going to start. And I want to start with a 45-degree right angle. And we can also tell it how to end. So I'm going to end with the same 45-degree. So I'm going to pull my thread back to the back, and I'm going to start right here. I also like to use the needle down position for this. So I'm going to center my B foot over my applique here. And what I'm going to do is sew. It's going to start with the narrow taper and get wider. And I just keep sewing and sewing and sewing until I get to where I want the taper to end. Okay, so now I'm going to tell it that I want to start the taper. So I'm going to touch the reverse button, or I want to end the taper, and I'm running out of bobbin thread, of course. Okay, so it will end the taper and stop, and then I can turn. Now I'm going to press not the start stop button, but the stop button. And what that does, now it's going to sew exactly the same length of tapering stitch as I did before. I'm going to press the start stop button. And so by following those steps, I have programmed this, and it's going to start and do the taper automatically. And there we go. I didn't quite get it long enough because I started a little too far in. But you can see we've got a nice, beautiful little mitered corner right there. You can use these in bunches of different ways. You don't have to put them around a box. You can create different designs by going different directions. And there are several different kinds of stitches you can do with this. So those are the decorative tapering stitches. So the next thing I want to show you is how to program stitches on the Brillance 80. So I'm going to choose a different menu. I'm going to go back here to, I kind of like to use this E menu here. And I'm going to touch the program button and go back to that E menu. And I'm going to choose a leaf that I like. And as I start to choose my stitches, they show up here, and it's in the order that they're going to stitch, and it will tell you how long your program is in millimeters, so you can get an idea of how big that is. I'm going to add a flower, and then one thing you might want to use this for maybe is a simple quilt label, or to put somebody's name on a garment, or you know, put your from grandma or made with love by grandma. You can do that kind of thing really easily. I'm just going to use the block alphabet that comes up, and I'm going to type just my name in here. Oh, sort of. I left out a letter. There we go. A-L. See if I can spell my name. Okay, and so those are the alphabets that are available. These are the sewing alphabets, not the embroidery alphabets. And then I'm going to add another flower, and I'm going to add that leaf back in. Now the other thing I can do here, other commands that are in here, you can add a stop, a fix, and a cut. So you can have it just, if by putting the stop in, it's going to stitch that just once, then fix, and then it'll cut with the scissors. So I'm going to touch OK, and what that's going to do is load it onto the stitching field, and I'm just going to press start stop to have it stitch out my pattern that my program that I made. My job is just to kind of keep my fabric straight. And there's my last leaf, and you see it stopped. It's if I start it again, it will fix. I'm just going to do it with manually and then cut. And there you go. Pretty fun to play with. So you can program any combination of stitches that you want, and if you want to save them, you can just press the little heart right there, that little red heart, and you can name your stitch and it will save it to the machine. I'm not going to save that one, but that's how you do programming. It's a lot of fun to play with. The next thing I want to show you is how to do free motion or stipple quilting A lot of people are wanting to do their own quilting on their machines, and so I'm going to show you how you can do that. First thing I want to do is I'm going to come back to the main menu A, and you can either scroll back like that or use the menu down here. I'm going to touch just a straight stitch. Still going to be using woven medium. The free motion setting on this machine is right here on the screen all the time. It's a little squiggly thing that looks kind of like stipple. And you have 3 options. This is really cool. There's the sensor Q foot, and that's my favorite, so that's the one I'm going to show you how to do or how to use. There's also an optional free motion ruler foot available for this machine, so if you like to use rulers to quilt with, you can do that. And then another option is there's the free motion floating, where it just kind of floats over the fabric at a higher speed. I like the free motion spring action because I feel like I have a little more control over it, so I've selected that option. I'm going to press OK, and in this case I have to take the ankle off the machine, so I'm going to use the screwdriver to unscrew that, or to loosen it, and then take the ankle off. The sensor Q foot can be a little bit difficult to put on at first if you haven't done it, so I wanted to show you how to do that. I bring it in from behind, and then you kind of have to tell it who's boss to fit this part in, and then the long white arm actually rests on the needle screw. So then I'm going to take the screw, excuse my fingers for a minute while I get it started anyway. And you want to make sure when you're done that the needle is lined up through the center of the foot. If it's not, then you need to work on it and get it lined up a little bit better. But basically this white piece just fits right into the shaft there. Okay, so I've got that set for free motion, which means the feed dogs have been lowered, and I'm going to start sewing. Now this is probably not one of my strengths, but one of the things I like to do is pull up my bobbin thread. It's really not long enough for me to do that right now, so we're not going to bother, but usually that's what I do. And I am now responsible for moving my fabric around. Now my favorite way to do this is I like to use the needle down position, and I do like to use the start stop button. The reason for that is that I don't have to control the speed of the machine and the speed of my hands. I can just, the machine will control itself. I'm going to slow it down just a little bit, and then let it keep a constant speed. Then I only have one variable to keep track of, which is how fast I move the fabric. So here we go. So this is how I like to do that. And you know, you have to regulate your own length of stitches, and the way you do that is by how fast you move your fabric. So if you can move your fabric all at about the same speed, you're going to get nice even stitches. If not, like me, you're going to have to keep working on it. Okay, so that's how that style of free motion quilting works. I'm going to go ahead and cut that thread. I don't know if you can see those stitches, but actually I think I did pretty well. Okay, so the other option that's available that comes with the machine is free motion floating, and it uses that R foot. So I'm going to go back and put the ankle back on. I don't have the ruler foot set up, so I won't be showing you that today because it's optional, but I do plan to do a video on that separately at some later date. Okay, so I'm going to put the ankle back on. This is the R foot. It could also be used as an embroidery foot or a darning foot, but the sensor Q foot, I think, provides a little more stability for me. All right, so now I need to change the type of free motion I'm going to do. I'm going to change it to free motion floating, and I need to set the presser foot pressure. For that, I'm going to raise it up a little bit. For me, I kind of like it about there. Okay, so I'm going to lift my foot up, put my needle down, and now what the machine's going to do is just float that foot doesn't go up and down like the sensor Q foot did. So for me, I feel like I don't have quite as much control, but everybody's different, and if you're used to kind of doing it this way, then the R foot and floating is for you. And I just say, try them all, see what works best for you. Everybody's a little different, so that's how you do it with the floating foot. And those two options come with the machine. Like I said earlier, the ruler foot is an optional purchase, an additional purchase. We also have some rulers available if you'd like to purchase those. Okay, so I'm going to take that off. I've turned off the free motion, and now I'm back to regular sewing mode. Really easy, simple to do. We're going to do some stitches called Animotion Stitches. They are on the menu K. These stitches are large, really large stitches, and they require the S foot. So I'm going to put the R foot back there. The S foot is an extra large foot. It just gives you a little more control over these stitches. And I like to, we did programming a little while ago. I like to program some of these stitches together. So I'm going to show you one of my favorite combinations, which is, I like this flower, but I like this one. So I'm going to go into programming mode. I'm going to go to the Animotion Stitches, which is menu K. I'm going to select this flower, and I'm going to select that stem, and I just think that's really pretty. And I'm just going to stitch it once, so I'm going to put the stop in and touch OK. And I'm just going to let the machine stitch that, and it should just sew it once. So again, the hardest thing about doing these is keeping your fabric straight and not trying to, the machine needs to move the fabric around. So basically I just try to keep it parallel so that it doesn't, so that it lines up properly. The more I get involved, the worse these stitches look. So I just try to let the machine do it all. These are really big and dramatic stitches, and I think they're just really beautiful. The nice thing about them too is, a lot of times people will say, well, I've tried the decorative stitches, but they don't show up very well. Because this goes back and forth, it does like a triple stitch. The stitches really show up well on your fabric too. Okay, and we did one iteration of that, and there's that beautiful flower. I just think these are really fun to play with. Another thing that this machine comes with is four-way stitches, and when I saw these, I just got really excited because I'm kind of crazy that way. The thing about these stitches is I was so excited to be able to use them on mending elbows and things, knees and such, because I had pretty much worn out a shirt that I had, and I was able to use these stitches to make it last a little bit longer. So when you open up one of these stitches, it'll show you what direction it's going to go. And on the screen, there's a little black dot right there, and that's the starting point. So that's how you know that it's going to go that direction. Now, to change directions, I just have to press the reverse button. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch along this. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. See, you have to think about where you're going, which direction you're going, which I didn't. Let me try that again. I'm going to start over here and press start, stop. Okay, now I'm going the correct direction. And I didn't have it lined up very well, but we're just practicing. And it is a good idea to practice with these things. Now, to change direction, I'm going to press the reverse button, and I want to go this way, and it's going to come towards me. So I'm going to press that button, and now it starts stitching toward me. Now, if I didn't want to go that direction, I can go any direction. I just keep pushing reverse until I get to the direction I want. I'm going to stop here, And I can either press the reverse button here or the reverse button on the screen. And I'm going to turn. And this time, oh, actually, I don't need to turn. I remember now, because I would be using probably my free arm for this if it was a sleeve or a pant leg. If you need to mend a knee, this is so wonderful because you can do it without changing the direction of your fabric. You can go in 4 directions. And I got one more direction, and it's going to go backwards. And I finally got a little better at lining it up. So like I said, it's good to practice on this before you try to use it for real, so you know how it's going to stitch. So I love those stitches. I have used them quite a bit. I've even used them to sew up a side of a bag, because I can just go this way and have it, you know, sew that direction, and it works really smoothly. Okay, there are also, just so you know, 8-way stitches available on the machine too, which are kind of cool. If I can select, oh, you have to select, I forget, you have to select the arrow, and it will stitch diagonally or up and down or side to side, whichever direction you select. Okay, so I'm going to go back now to our dimensional stitches. So this machine has a lot of extra fancy stitches. And our dimensional stitches, there are a couple of different types, 2 or 3 different types. The first one I'm going to show you is an applique stitch. Now it's asking for the S foot still, and a size 80 needle and some stabilizer. And I'm just going to use this same fabric that I used before. And I've selected the sun. Now, one of the things I love about this too is that if you touch the question mark and touch the stitch that you want to stitch, it will tell you what you need to do to stitch this stitch properly. So what it says here, we're going to activate needle down. I'm going to press start stop, and when the machine stops, I need to place my applique fabric from behind and then sew until the machine stops again. Okay, so I'm going to say okay, I'm going to press start stop, and it's going to start on that first sun. Okay, the machine is stopped, and it has lifted that foot up partially. And by putting the fabric in from behind, what it means is putting it under the foot from behind until you get all the way up to the needle. You want to make sure you don't move the fabric too much while you're doing that, and then press start stop again. I'm going to do a couple more of these so you get the idea. And I just keep little scraps cut into small pieces for this kind of thing. If you like to save tiny scraps, this is a great way to use them. I'm going to slide that in behind again, make sure it's lined up. Press start stop. I didn't quite get it far enough up, I don't think. Okay, and one more. Again, this is a good thing to practice before you stitch it on your final product. So you need to know kind of how it's going to work. Okay, and then I'm going to slide this in from behind right up to the needle. Press start stop. Okay, and I'm going to stop at the end of that stitch. Okay, now you're saying, well, that's kind of ugly, right? It's just got these extra pieces of fabric. So what you do is take your little applique scissors, if you have them, or some nice small sharp scissors. I've been using mine for things I probably shouldn't have, so they're not as sharp right now. But you cut away the applique fabric and you've got your design. So these are special applique stitches that are really pretty. Some of them have like flowers and leaves, so there might be 2 places where it stops and you add fabric, and it's important to read the instructions on how to do them because of that. Boy, I really did dull my scissors. Okay, so there you go. Nice little stitches. Okay, I think those are a lot of fun to use. I've put these down a granddaughter's skirt. The little hearts are, in particular, I think are cute for a girl. Then there are some stitches, in addition to all the applique stitches, there are some that are called pop-up stitches. And I'm going to do this one right here. It's a horizontal pop-up, and I'm going to press the question mark and touch my stitch. So it says activate needle down and press the start stop button to sew. When the machine stops, place the pop-up fabric from the right, touching the needle, and sew until the machine stops. Turn the project 90 degrees counterclockwise so that the pop-up fabric is behind the needle, and sew again. Turn it back to its original position and sew until the machine stops again. Okay, so that's a lot of information, but I think I understand. So I'm going to press start stop, and it's going to stitch part of the stitch, and then when it stops, if I forget, I can touch the question mark and say, okay, now it's stopped. I place the pop-up fabric from the right, touching the needle. So I usually use my tweezers to kind of help me get it in there where it's supposed to go. I want that, and I'm using just a little scrap of tulle. Okay, and then it says place the pop-up to the right, and then start stop until the machine sew until the machine stops again. Now I'm going to turn the project counterclockwise so that the pop-up fabric's in the back. Okay, and then I'm going to sew until the machine stops again. So glad these instructions are here for this. Okay, and then I'm going to turn it back to its original position and sew until it stops. We'll do one more of these. So when it stops, I'm going to add my pop-up fabric again and put it in under the foot all the way up to the needle, so the needle can stitch over that, and I'm going to press start stop. It's going to tack it down. Now I'm going to turn that to the back, press start stop. It's going to stitch over that, and then I'm going to press my stop button so it'll just finish this stitch nicely at the end. Okay, and I'll use my scissors to cut it off. Now with this, you can trim your pop-up fabric however you like. I like to kind of make them a little bit smaller than that. And there you go. You have kind of a cute dimensional stitch. Okay, and then there's one more kind of dimensional stitch available for this machine, on this machine. These are sequin stitches. And I actually forgot to get the open toe foot. They recommend the optional open toe foot, which I don't have. So we're going to have to do this a little bit blindly. It's easier with that foot. I'm going to have to poke the sequins in there. But okay, so this stitch will stitch a design, and then you can add a sequin to it. Let's see if I can do it. So once again, if you need more information about the stitch, you can press the question mark and press the stitch, and it will tell you how to do this. It also tells you, gives you some detail on what size sequins you can use. So for this one, I have to use the smaller sequins because it stitches around it. Now, what you do is take your sequin and place it where the machine tells you to put it. I'm going to put this right up next to that the needle, and to the left of the needle. And I'm going to actually this time just use my hand control to bring the needle down in the middle of the sequin, and then I can press start stop again, and it should line it up beautifully. Takes a little practice, like a lot of our stitches. Here's a square sequin. So you want to find, for the ones that get stitched all the way around, you need to find the ones that are the right size. And this can get a little interesting with that. The clear open toe foot doesn't have this metal piece right there that's kind of getting in my way. So it's a little easier to use. And I just got distracted today and didn't get that done. Well, okay, you get the idea. It's a little fussy. I can lift my foot up a little higher so I can see better. There we go. I think I can do it now. And get that sequin in there. Now I'm going to use my hand wheel and land that needle right in the center of it. Okay, and then press start stop. So you're not going to do a lot of sequins fast, but if you like using sequins and decorative items like that, they can really add some interest to your piece. Now I'm going to show you, there are some where you can use bigger sequins, but you need to have the hole really close to the edge. So this is one where it doesn't stitch around the sequin. And so I'm going to slide that right in there. I'm actually going to lift my foot up again, and I'm going to use the hand wheel to get my needle right in that hole of that sequin. Move the sequin around a little bit. And there, because it doesn't go all the way around the stitch, I can use bigger sequins and have even more of a dramatic effect. Okay, so this machine also comes with some theme stitches. These are stitches that all kind of go together, and you can sew, like this one starts with squares, and when I press the reverse button, it's going to change to the next stitch in the sequence and the theme, and I just can keep pressing the reverse button either here on the screen or on the machine, and it's going to keep changing stitches. And we've got all of those stitches. You can stitch them in any order, as many as you want. I'm going to go with a stop. We're going to finish that stitch and cut. So I really like to help people understand the difference between the start stop button and the stop button. The start stop button is going to start the machine sewing and stop it from sewing. The stop button is used to finish a stitch completely, or to, when we were doing programming, it'll finish one sequence of the stitch. And then there are also other embellished stitches you can use. We have a couple of stitches that you can use that allow space for hot fix crystals. So if you like to do crystals, you can stitch these beautiful stitches and add your crystals to them. And that's what those look like. So you would just put a hot fix crystal right there. And then these are tassel stitches, and these are dimensional. I'm going to just do one of these two, so I'm going to press that stop button. And what it's done is it's done some big lengthy stitches here and some tighter stitches there, and I can take my seam ripper and cut those stitches so they've been tacked down, and they are dimensional, so you've got a nice little fringe, so you can get kind of a fringe effect. I thought one of the Viking educators, I don't remember which one, was very clever and used this with some straight stitches to turn it into little brooms on a Halloween wall hanging that she made. I thought that was a really neat use of those. In addition, there are these Animotion stitches, and they're huge and really beautiful. I like this little, I think that's a dragonfly. So we'll just do one of those, and they only stitch one at a time. I've tried to get around that and I haven't figured out how to do that. So if somebody does, let me know. But basically you just stitch one of these, and it's a big, dramatic, beautiful stitch. There are lips, nose, and eyes here. So if you ever make dolls or make appliques, maybe of people's faces, and need those, I think those are really great stitches to know about. And you can take them into embroidery too. Okay, so it's And it also cuts, so I don't even have to press the scissors button. So there's that beautiful stitch too. So there's so much you can do with this machine. Now there's one more menu that I want to mention, and this is specialty stitches. And these stitches require a different foot, additional feet that you would have to purchase. It includes some candle wicking stitches, some yarn stitches, 3-hole yarn stitches, and I'm going to be showing, doing videos of some of these optional feet too, so you might look for those one of these days. Okay, now we're going to start with basic embroidery. So what I did to select embroidery is I'm going to touch this little hoop up here, and it brings me all these options. When it first comes up, you can see that basic embroidery is selected, and it's larger than the others. And what's really nice here is if you're looking for a different technique in embroidery, you can select that technique. When you go into stitch out, I'm going to say, yes, okay, I was doing something earlier. Now I want to start over. All of the designs that are showing now are only for standard embroidery. So you can select items this way, or I'm going to go back to that screen, the start screen. And what I could do if I just wanted to do applique, these are all the different kinds of applique that are available on the machine. And so on. There's freestanding embroidery, cutwork embroidery, yarn embellished embroidery, and so on. But we're going to start with basic embroidery today, which is this option. And instead of selecting that, I'm actually going to select the Start New option. And what that does is it brings up all of the designs that are installed on the machine. So I don't want to stitch anything really big, so I'm going to look in here for a design that I think might be a little bit smaller, and I think one of these is smaller. Well, it's 200 by 200. What's nice here is you can kind of see the size right here, how many stitches there are, how many color changes there are. So that's really useful. Also, this is the file name. So I'm going to keep looking until I find one that's, yeah, it's only got 1,077 stitches in it. Maybe we'll use that one. Or actually, how about this sunflower? This one has 7,000 stitches and 3 colors. That's a little more than I want to do. So I'm going to keep looking. Oh, and those are interesting. I didn't remember seeing those. Actually, let me come over here, and I know there's some designs in here. I want one color change, so I'm going to select this one right here. And you see it's come into the screen, but not quite in the center. So I'm going to touch just the center of that wheel right there, and it lands the design in the center for me. Okay. Now, on the embroidery screen, there's a lot here too. So I'm just going to kind of show you the tabs down the side. First of all, we have, this is that knowledge center where there can be a project. So if you were using a project, the instructions would be here. The next tab down with a zigzag on it is stitches. This was bringing up all those stitches that we had in sewing. You can actually bring any stitch from sewing into embroidery and combine them, and I'll show you some ways that we can use that a little bit later. The next tab is all of your fonts. The top ones are the sewing fonts, the fonts from sewing, and the bottom ones are the embroidery fonts, and we're going to play with those in a little later too. Below that, these are the built-in designs. And you can also make the screen a little wider like I did by touching it again. And you can scroll through either by swiping or by selecting the different letters down below. And they are all of different categories. These are fantasy designs, these are holiday designs, and so on. So there are a lot of designs already built in, but then of course you also have access to USB drives. I don't have one plugged in right now, so we're not seeing that. But if I had a USB device plugged in, you would be able to select files from there. What you're seeing here are all the files from my SewNet, from my cloud storage. And you can see some of these are actually projects from Viking, like this one. and there are a bunch of designs that I've found somewhere else. I've just loaded them to the cloud, and they're here waiting for me to play with later. So it's really kind of exciting and very convenient just to have all of that available. All right, and then the last thing on the screen here is your colors, and you can thread colors, and you can edit these if you want or leave them the same. I'm going to leave them the same, and I'm going to go back to the flower tab, which is the built-in designs, and have that disappear, or at least shrink down a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to change this to the larger hoop that I've decided to use today. So to do that, I can just touch the 120 by 120, and these are millimeters, by the way, or centimeters. I don't know, I get confused. And we're going to use the 360 by 200 hoop, so I'm going to select that. Also over here is our toolbox, and you can see I've got one design here. This is where we can mirror image designs. If you wanted to flip that upside down, I'm going to put it back to its original orientation. You can flip it side to side. Oh, I think I touched the duplicate instead. You can duplicate, and it kind of lands them right on top of each other. I'm going to delete that second one. Here's where we can mirror image side to side. I'm going to put it back the way it was. Copy, I already showed you. And if I want to remove this from the screen, I would touch the trash can. It doesn't remove it from your memory, it just removes it from the screen. Okay, and there's some other functions that we can do in more advanced embroidery. Okay, so now I've selected my design and I'm ready to hoop my fabric. So when you get the hoop, the Brillance 80 comes with the 360 by 200 hoop, which is what I'm holding, a 260 by 200 hoop, and a 120 by 120. We're going to use the large hoop, 360 by 200. There are many other hoops available for this machine, but these are the three that it comes with. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've loosened this little clamp here. I'm going to loosen that up and take the inside of the hoop out. And you almost always want to use stabilizer with your embroidery. There are a few exceptions, but we're not going to talk about that today. So I put my stabilizer down, and on top of the stabilizer, I'm going to put the fabric that I'm going to stitch on. And you can see how it kind of moves around a little bit, so I got to make sure it's layered nicely. And I center that over the hoop. I want to talk a little bit about the hoops before I put the center in. The number or the size of the hoop is always printed at the bottom, or embossed, I guess, at the bottom. That's important because our hoops are not completely symmetrical. The center point is highlighted here with these little tabs in the center. That's the horizontal center, and the vertical center is indicated here. You might notice that there's a little extra space up here at the top. That is, the machine needs a little bit of extra space to move around in, so not all of the hoop is usable space, and this does indicate center. If you put this in upside down, you will have it, and you try to center something in the hoop using those marks, you'll be off because it will be up too high. So it's really important to just get into the habit right away of putting the size at the bottom. And then you fit the hoop inside the outer hoop. And you don't want to push and pull, and it doesn't have to be really taut, the fabric. So I just put it in here and try to keep it nice and smooth. What can happen if you pull on it too much here is you can distort your fabric. And the bad thing that will happen is if you do distort it and stretch it out, when you take your embroidery out of the hoop, it's going to pucker and bring itself back in. So you really don't want to do that. It can affect the quality of your stitching. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is close this clamp, and I should be able to do it pretty easily. It's still a little tight, so I'm going to loosen it. Got to think about which way is looser. I'm going to loosen it a little bit more so that I can close that easily with one finger. And now I can use the knob here to make it tighter. we don't want it popping out, so just check and make sure the frame's really in there. I like to use the palms of my hands a little bit because that gives me a little more strength sometimes than my fingers. Okay, and once that's in, we're ready to put it on the machine. All right, so I've got my fabric hooped. I've got my design selected, and I'm just going to go ahead and press go. On the way into embroidery, I love this screen. It gives you access to all the, it kind of reminds you of all the things that you need to think of before you start embroidering. One thing is that for best results, Viking recommends that you use a single needle plate, one with a smaller hole. It comes with that plate. I have the bigger one on here right now, and I'm not going to switch to the smaller one, and it's smart enough to know that I've got that one. But for best results, you really do want to switch to that smaller hole in the stitch plate. It shows you what hoop you've selected. Then there are some options here for your colors. If you want, you can have it color block sort, so that all of the blocks of the same color are together. You can have it merge color blocks, so it will stitch all of the colors that are the same together without stopping. And then you can also choose monochrome. I do use monochrome quite a bit. I use the other two with caution, because if you have designs that are layered to create a certain kind of artistic effect, if you change the order of the colors, they might not stitch out the same way. So I use those with a little bit of caution. I also do use based around the design and based around the hoop quite a bit. I'm not going to do that right now, but in more advanced embroidery where you might not want to hoop the item, like if it was a leather jacket, for example, you probably wouldn't want to baste around the hoop either, but there are times when you will use the basting. Okay, and then on the other side of the screen, you can see that it defaults to the sensor Q foot, and that's what's recommended for embroidery, and that's the foot that I have on. Or you can also use the R foot with the regular sewing ankle, and I don't think I've ever done that, but it's possible. We're going to leave the deluxe stitch system on. That is what portions out the thread beautifully for you and makes your tension work well. And then I'm also going to leave in the automatic thread cutter and automatic jump stitch trim. But you can turn off the thread, the jump stitch trim, and you can turn off both options if you prefer. The time that I use that the most is when I'm quilting in the hoop. I actually turn them both off. One thing you should know, I've had customers ask about this, the machine will cut your thread between colors, but it only cuts the top thread. The engineers with Viking determined they think that you get a better stitch if they don't cut the bobbin thread. So when you're finished, you will have a lot of bobbin threads on the back that have not been cut. And you can choose what to do with those. Okay, so I'm not going to make any changes here. I'm just going to press continue. And that takes me then into embroidery stitch out mode. And it's going to tell me, okay, you said you were going to use this hoop, now you need to put it on. So what you want to do to put the hoop on the machine is slide it straight in under the foot. I do that first. If you go up or down or angle it, it can be hard to get in, so you just want to make sure that the hoop is straight. And then on the left side here is where the attachment for the hoop that slides into the embroidery arm. This is what we call the arm, and this has robotics in it that are very similar to the robotics that are used in long arm quilting. So what you want to do to put it in, you're going to take this plastic piece, that's the connector, and slide it in between the plastic and metal portion of the arm. So I'm just going to slide it straight in and push until it clicks. This little button right here is what we'll use to take the hoop off the machine, and at that time we'll push that button down and pull toward us. You don't ever want to push this down as you're putting the hoop on, because what can happen is you can end up pushing the hoop in too far, and you could even end up stitching on the hoop itself, which is something you really don't want to do. So it's important to make sure you don't use that button when you put it on. Okay, so that's putting the hoop on. I'm going to touch OK now that I have it on. And I'm ready to do my first color. I've got 3 color changes on this design. So I'm going to go ahead and press now the Start Stop button. I'm going to lightly hold on to this tail end of the thread so that when it cuts it, I can pull that out and I don't have a tail sitting there. Okay, that was my first color. It stitched a few stitches for me. I'm not going to actually rethread, but what you would do now if you want to is rethread the machine with another color. I wanted you to be able to see it. I don't want to take the time to do that. But what I wanted to show you down here is what happens to the screen. So down here you can see one of the spools has gone over here. And we stitched color 1, had 968 stitches in it. If I need to go back and do anything with color 1 again, I can actually touch that color and it will start over on color 1. But color 1 did just fine, so I'm going to skip to color 3. Sometimes you'll get in the hoop projects where they'll tell you to skip a color, and you can do that here, and that's how you do it. If for some reason you need to step through a design and go a little bit forward, you can do that. So down here where the little needle is, you can go use the plus sign to go forwards and the minus sign to go backward. And the shortcut to get to the beginning of a color is just to touch the whole color. Another thing you can do with color, let's say you got about 50% through a color and something strange happened. You know, stuff happens with this sometimes. And what I would recommend, if you're having trouble and you need to turn the machine off for some reason, you can actually check here and see what number of stitch you were on. And then when you come back in and want to restart, you can touch the little needle here, and it brings up a keypad where you can type in exactly the color, the stitch that you want to start with. Okay. So we're fine with starting with color number 2. The other thing I think that's nice here is the spools. As you watch this, that spool is, as we start stitching, it's going to start to run out. So I'm going to go ahead and have it start again, and I can talk a little bit more about the screen. Nope. I'm going to stop it because it didn't cut my thread for some reason, probably because I was holding on too tight. I'm going to trim it and then let it start again. So right now you can see it's going through color number 1. It has a total of 968 stitches, and we're on stitch number 140 something, 150, 160, okay? On the right side, or the left side of the screen here, these little plus and minus signs here actually affect the tension for you, the balance of the stitches. So if you're having bobbin thread showing on top or top thread going too far under and looping, this is one way you can adjust that. I'm going to go ahead and stop so we won't watch the whole design stitch out. I just want to show you what some of the options are that are available. Okay, so I'm going to go and select another design, and we're going to play around with design positioning here in a minute. So to go back to color edit, I'm in stitch out mode right now, and the reason that I know that is because this green arrow is over here in the right hand corner. So I'm going to touch that arrow to go back, and it's going to warn me that because I haven't finished the design, it's going to ask me if I really want to do this or not, and I do this time. So I'm just going to touch OK to return to embroidery edit. Now it always wants you to take the hoop off before it does that. So I'm going to reach over, push the button down to release the hoop, and pull the hoop straight towards me to get it off the machine. And turn it around, and sure enough, it doesn't cut that bobbin thread. Okay, I'm going to touch OK, and we're back to embroidery edit. I'm going to actually just delete this design, show you how to do that. So you have to actually select the design. It has to have a box around it in order for you to be able to do anything with it. And I'm going to touch the trash can, and I'm going to come in and find a different design. I don't know, let's see. I'm not much into the kitchen stuff right now. Let's take these little hearts. I'm going to bring that in, just a tiny little design. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to move one of them over. And because of the way that looks, I'm going to mirror image it there so that they kind of, now you can even move the whole hoop around. Most of the time I don't want to do that. There we go. So I can use my finger to move the designs around. Those of you who might have had a designer diamond or ruby or a topaz will find that this is really a lot of fun to use your finger. Once you get to the point where you want to make some fine adjustments, though, you can use the hand wheel, or the wheel here, I like to think of it that way, to rotate designs. So this is where the positioning is. To rotate a design in Embroidery Edit, you touch this little icon right here. It's got two arrows kind of going in a circle, and it changes the wheel so that you can rotate them by 90 degrees if you want, or just smaller increments too, if you want to do that. The other thing you can do on this screen is increase or decrease the size of the embroidery design slightly. You can go up to about 20% bigger and down to about 20% smaller. Anything more than that, so I'm making this one a little bit bigger, and I'll show you this one I'm going to take a little bit smaller, and that's as far as it'll go in terms of resizing. To do any more than that, you really need embroidery software, which we can also help you with. This machine actually, and all of our Husqvarna Viking and FOF embroidery machines, comes with some free software that will let you create your own fonts, and it will let you see pictures of the embroidery instead of a file name, but that's something I will show you separately. But just know that that's freely available on the website, Husqvarna Viking website. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch these two designs out and arrange them around the stuff that I stitched out earlier. Once again, I'm not going to make any changes on the way in, so I'll just say continue. And I'm going to slide my hoop in. Now, I think you know these are both similar designs, so what I'm going to do so that it doesn't stop in the middle, all of those options that were offered to me on the way in, several of them are available here as well. And I'm going to choose this little icon right here, has to do with your colors, and it's got color block, sort, merge, and monochrome. I'm going to touch monochrome, and so now my little designs have gone gray on the screen, and it's going to treat it as one color so it won't stop and cut the thread between. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to show you once we got here is, those are your basting options. I'm going to move that out of my way for right now. This is called design positioning. I'm going to touch this little flower with the 4 arrows on it. And what you can do here is by selecting icon number 1 down here, and I really recommend you just do it in the steps 1, 2, 3, 4. So sometimes step 1 is all you'll need to do. What I'm going to do is find the center of this entire design. So I'm going to touch 1, and then I touch the toolbox. These are upper left corner, upper right corner, middle, lower left, and lower right corners. I'm going to touch that center, and then I'm going to touch number 2. And now I can actually move the design around on the screen so that I can place the center of it exactly where I want it, and I want it to line up with the center of this other design that I started. Now I can do that on the screen until I want to get a little bit more fine, and then I can use the hand wheel, and sometimes I'll even bring my needle down so I can see how close I am. You have to take it back up, so I'm going to check. I can get as close as I need to, and I want to show you Right now that's probably good enough for this design, but I want to show you how far you can go with this. So on this screen here, I'm going to actually go back to number 1, and I'm going to move, let's say I wanted to line that point of the heart, that bottom point of the heart up on a particular place in the hoop. So what I can do in number 1 is come down here and select this magnifying glass, and I'm going to touch the first option here, which lets you focus all the way down to a single stitch. Look at that. I can choose to line this up not just on the stitch, but on the entry point or exit point of a particular stitch. And this is a really powerful way to do design positioning. I'm going to zoom back out now to the hoop, and I'm going to minimize that so I don't see it anymore. And now I can go to step 2, and I can put that single point, that stitch point, anywhere I want in that hoop. So this is a really powerful design positioning program. Okay, so I'm going to go back to step 1 again, select the center again, back to 2, and I'm going to show you another feature of design positioning. I'm going to move it back up roughly where I had it before. Okay, so it's just about in the center. Now let's say I want to tilt this a little bit. I'm going to select 3, and I've got another little blue cursor there. I am going to move that to the heart up there on the upper right corner. I'm going to zoom in, and I want to get just right there to the center of that heart and come down and position it a little more finely. Zoom back out, and now I'm going to select number 4. When I do that, the machine turns the center point that I lined up originally into a fulcrum, and I can move this design around the center in any direction I want to go. So I can not only line it up anywhere, I can angle it and tilt it anywhere within that. And there are times when I go back and forth between these different positioning tools to get things to line up exactly where I want them. I'm going to stop, I'm going to select that, and so now you can see it's going to stitch right where I've placed it. Okay, once again, I'm not going to finish the stitching on this because there are a few more things that I would like to show you. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to cut my thread. And if you use the scissors here, it will cut the bobbin thread for you. Okay, the next thing I want to show you, something that's called design shaping. This is a feature that you have on the machine, and it's that little icon with the stars, what I touch to enter design shaping, and I love it. It tells you where you are up here. The first tab on design shaping is your shape menu, and all of these shapes are available for you to choose. I'm going to first of all choose a straight line, and if I go back and minimize that a little bit again, I've got my straight line right there, and I would like to rotate that, and I'm going to even minimize it more because I want to make this bigger. So I'm going to change to the resizing and make it, whoops, I'm making it smaller. I want to make it bigger. You can either use the arrows or you can pinch and drag. I'm not very good at that on this screen, so I'm just going to use my arrows to make it larger. Come on. Got to select the right thing there. So it's gradually making that box, that line longer. Okay, now what I can do next is I can come in and either select a design from embroidery, or I can select a stitch from sewing. And one of the most popular things that people do with this feature is, let's say you wanted a line of buttonholes that were perfectly spaced. If I select this buttonhole, I can add as many of these as I want, and I can have them spaced out, evenly spaced like this. If I wanted to, I could left justify them. I'm not sure. That might be kind of some decorative effect. You can have them centered and so on. So there's all those options. I'm going to go back to evenly spaced. You also have other choices. You can have them centered on the line like they are right now. You can place them above the line, below the line. I'm going to leave them centered. And you can rotate them. So this is not the line, but the actual stitches. So let's say I want to rotate them 90 degrees. Now instead of the buttonholes going horizontal, they're going vertical. And you can keep going with that. Of course, they're going to look the same. Oops, touched the wrong thing. There's your magnifying glass if you need it. And then there's one more option here, which you can change, again, the way that they show, the way that they are placed on the line, and that will be a little more obvious later. So now all I have to do to stitch out those buttonholes is go into Embroidery Edit. If I want to, I can try to make them a little bit more spaced out, make that a little bit bigger, and then I can press Go to Stitch Out. Now they're right down the middle. So this is a case where I'm going to move them. And we probably won't stitch these out, but I just want to show you another feature in here. I'm going to go back to Design Positioning. I'm going to select number 1. I'm going to select the center again. And I'm going to select number 2. And I'm just going to move these buttonholes so that they are not going to stitch over whatever else I've done there. And I'd be ready to stitch them out. If, like I do now, I have kind of this other stitching in the middle here, and I want to check and make sure they're not going to stitch over something else, or if I don't want them to stitch over a collar or something like that, this is a really great little feature right here, this 4-way icon with the arrows. If you touch it the first time, it's going to go to the upper left corner of the design. The second time, it's going to go up to the upper right corner, and it's going to show you where that's going to be. The third time, it's going to take you down to the lower right corner, so you can see where that's going to stitch. And the fourth time, it's going to go to the lower left. And the last time you touch it, it's going to take you back to where it will start stitching. I have found that to be a really useful feature many times. Okay, so I'm going to not stitch these out. I'm going to take the hoop out, go back to Edit, Embroidery Edit, so I can show you a few more things. Now, a lot of us love to do applique in the hoop, and you can actually create your own applique designs on the machine without having software. So this is pretty awesome. To get to design applique, you're going to touch the little flower that has a pair of scissors on top of it. So I'm going to touch that. Again, I'm in Design Applique. The shape menu looks very similar, but what this is going to do instead, and we've got all the alphabet and some letters and some couple of special characters in there. I am going to actually choose, I think, the square this time. And what you can do, or you know what? I'm going to choose the letter D for me. Okay. Now I can actually create a satin stitch, a narrow satin stitch, a wider satin stitch. This is kind of a I touched the candle wicking. That's a small candle wicking, large candle wicking, and then in the center, got kind of a disorganized, not real neat satin stitch. So something that's a little more jagged. That's the word I guess I'm looking for. So I'm going to say okay to that. I like that, the way that looks. And I've got the 260 by 200 hoop selected here, so I'm going to go back to select my 360 by 200, and I'm going to press go. Now, if you have not done applique in the hoop, I don't want monochrome. That's really kind of important. Let me put the hoop on. Remember earlier I had changed it to monochrome. It's going to stay that way as long as I have the machine on until I turn it off. So I want to go and turn that off, and I'm going to bring my color block list up again. And do you see how this icon right here, the monochrome icon, is turquoise? I'm going to touch that, and now it's not turquoise. And it's not, that means it's not activated. So the first color that's going to stitch here is going to be the outline for your applique. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch that. Oh, man. This is a really large D, so you can be really bold here if you want to be. Okay, so that's called a placement stitch. It's going to come to the center and show you where the opening's going to be for the center of the letter. And we're only going to stitch over a little bit of what I did before. Okay, so that again is called the placement stitch. Now I'm actually going to use a piece of denim. And the next thing we're going to do, I just want to make sure it'll all fit in there. I think it will. What we want to do is cover up the placement stitch with the fabric that we're going to use for the applique. Okay, so get that nice and smooth. If you want to, you can spray temporary adhesive spray on the back of this before you put it on. I'm not going to do that. And now I'm going to stitch what's called the tack down stitch. So it's going to go around and outline the letter D. And so because I didn't do anything to keep that flat, you know, I have to watch my fabric carefully and make sure it's nice and smooth. And with the tack down stitch, it's going to go over it a couple of more times to make it a little bit more sturdy. Now it's going to go do the center. So you can make these letters bigger or smaller. And numbers in any of the shapes, the star, the circle, all of that. Really got quite a bit of flexibility, and my customers who have these machines really like this feature and use it quite a bit. You know, with a circle, you could actually embroider an initial in the center. You could turn it into a patch, do an embroidery design inside the circle if you wanted to. So there's just many, many possibilities for this feature here. Okay, now for this size applique, I'm actually going to take it out of the hoop and I'm going to use my scissors to cut that thread. Like, you can either do that or you can cut the bobbin thread after you take it off, but I tend to do that quite a bit. And now what I'm going to do is trim. Usually I use my applique scissors for this, but because it's the denim, I'm going to use a regular pair of scissors here. And you just trim around the design. You want to probably get a little bit closer than I'm getting right now. And I'm not going to try to go in there and get the middle. I'll just kind of give you an idea of how this works. And you want to trim nice and close. It's nice that you don't have to, I love this because you don't have to cut your shape out of your applique. The machine kind of does that for you. So then you would go put it back on the machine. Okay, make sure it clicks in. And now it's going to do that satin stitch around the edge. And you'll see when I said that I needed to trim it closer, you'll see that. Not a whole lot. And we're not going to watch this whole thing either, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how the applique works. So I'm going to stop right here and I'm going to cut my thread. And there we go. So it's going to do a nice wide, I chose the wide satin stitch, so it's going to do a nice wide satin stitch, and it's going to be just a little bit jagged on the edges like that. So now that I've finished my embroidery, one of the important things to do is I need to tell you a little bit about needles. You want to make sure that you're changing your needle about every 8 hours of sewing is what Viking recommends. And whenever I do that, I also go into the bobbin case and clean. So I'm going to show you that right now. So what we have to do is take the cover off the bobbin case and take your screwdriver. It works pretty well. And what I do is just set that up in one of the corners and kind of twist it until the stitch plate comes off. That's how you take it off. And then inside, it comes apart a little bit more, so you can pull this little piece comes off, and it's got a tab that will go right back in there. I'm going to take the thread out, and then this is the bobbin case. And I don't know if you can see in there, but there's some dust and it got a little bit dirty. So what I'm going to do is take I call it a cotton swab, dip it in rubbing alcohol, and then just swipe that around the bobbin case anywhere you can reach. And so at a first pass, that's what I got so far. And then after you kind of get that cleaned out, and I've used up to 4 or 5 of these things depending on how much cotton or how fluffy the fabric is or how much it sheds. So just put that cotton swab pretty much in any place that you can get it. The nice thing about the rubbing alcohol is that it kind of helps attract the dust to it, and it dries really quickly, so it's not going to be hard on your machine that way. Okay, so I think I've got just about everything I can get out of there for right now. If it had been dirtier, I would have spent a little bit more time on that. And now I'm ready to go on. I'm going to put my pieces back together. One thing you really don't ever want to do is use canned air inside the machine. If you blow it into the machine, it can get things up into places where we can't even get. So that could really cause some damage to your machine. The one place where you can use canned air is here in the bobbin case. If you start to notice that there's fuzz and buildup in this area, then it would be perfectly fine to take this out of your machine and spray it with some canned air to clear all of that out, because that can affect your tension. So I'm going to put the bobbin case back in, and it goes with this opening, goes straight in facing the feed dogs there. And then I just use my finger to kind of settle it in, and you'll know when it feels like, there we go. When it clicks in and it does that, you know you've got it in the right spot. Next is this gray piece. I'm going to slide that in and on top of the bobbin case. Now before I do anything else, one of the things that gets tied up sometimes with thread is the cutter. And this right here, this little piece right here, is the piece that comes across and cuts your thread for you. You can take your screwdriver and put it down into the side there and actually move that piece over. Maybe, there we go, to the right. The actual blade is right here, so it can be replaced if needed, if it gets nicked or something. But oftentimes, pieces of thread will get stuck in there. So I'll take my tweezers or my cotton swab and clean that out, and then put the blade back down, move this piece back over to the left, and sometimes the thread gets hooked around this part too, and it can lift up out of there and go right back in very easily. Okay, so the next thing, once you've got it clean, is to put the stitch plate back on. It's got a tab here in the back, and there's a hole right there that tab fits into. You need to make sure it gets in there. You don't want to press down on this if it's not in the right place, because you can bend these little tabs out of place, and eventually they break once you've bent them once. So it's just a good idea to make sure it's in the right place. Then you can just push it down and it's ready to go. Then you drop your bobbin in and make sure it's in place, and you're ready to start sewing again. Okay, so some additional features in embroidery that this machine comes with. It's wireless capable. So when you get your machine home and need to set that up, there's an icon right up here in the upper left-hand corner. And when you touch that, you'll be able to select from whatever network you use in your home. And then you'll be able to access your MySewnet account. So this machine also comes with a MySewNet account on the cloud where you can store designs, and that's what this little cloud is. I've got it connected with our MySewNet cloud folder, and it's showing that my files are all synchronized, and it shows me how much space we've used. Another feature because it's wireless, one of the wonderful things about this machine is that when there is an update for the machine, it comes automatically to your machine, and you can just select to load it. This little green icon down here at the bottom, I just love. When you touch that, you get free stuff sometimes. So often they'll send you, here's a notification of an update that needed to be done. Here's an idea on how to do some programming of stitches. This is a little talking about the MySewNet library, and I am going to show you that a little bit later, but there is a whole library available to you now through MySewNet. You also get tips and hints, like this is how a little project on how to reuse ties to make a nice detailed neckline. I think that's really a smart idea. And then sometimes you even get free embroidery designs. So this particular project includes a couple of different ways to use these designs, and then to download the design, I just touch that and it will save it right here on the machine for me for when I want to use it. So I just love this feature on this machine. It keeps you kind of up to date with what's going on. Okay, so I mentioned the library, and I'm going to show you where the files come for that. So if I want to load a file from the library, I have to have already searched for it on my computer, and I'll show you that in a minute. But to access it after I've saved it, I go ahead and go into embroidery mode, and on this tab right here with the little red heart, I touch that tab, and there's a new folder. Once you've subscribed to that, you do have to pay a monthly subscription fee for that. When you touch the folder and hold it, the designs that you have selected as your favorites on the library will show up right here, and all you have to do is load them. And that's a cute little rosebud design there. I'm not going to stitch it out right now, but you certainly could. Okay, so let me show you where that came from. Okay, so I've got my laptop out, and I'm going to go to MySewNet Cloud. So all I have to do is type mysewnet.com, and I've been there a few times, so it just comes back up automatically. So here is where you set up your account if you don't have one. And you can register your machine here. You can, this is where you can also subscribe to the library under Manage My Subscriptions. I'm going to go back home, back to the home page, or to the MySewNet menu. And that was my account. Now I'm going to click on the cloud, and this is where you can see the files that you have stored in the cloud. And once they're here, I can upload and download files and so on, but this is a list of all of the folders and files that are also showing up on the machine. It's the same list. So if I want to look at those library designs again that I just showed you a minute ago, here they are. I can download them or do whatever I want to do with those. Or let's say I bought a design from, I think this one is from Sweet Pea, and it's a knitting tote design. So I can take that out of storage, or I can add things here. But this is all the designs that I wanted to have on available to me on my machine. Right here, this image stitch is another interesting one. This is associated with an app that I'm going to show you in a minute. So that file folder is there too. All right, so that's the cloud storage. And you can also download the sync tool to your laptop, and when you put things in that folder, it will, you don't even have to go online on the web. You can just load them into that folder in File Explorer, and it will sync them up with your machine. There's a help center here. There's also a project creator, and I know we have a couple of different customers who work together with other customers to make designs, or they run Etsy shops together, that kind of thing. And this is a way that you can document a project if you want to share one with each other. So if you like to do that kind of thing, that's available to you too. And then the library is what I got kind of excited about. And this is the one that's a subscription. You pay a monthly fee. It's kind of like Netflix. And there are, the last time I checked, there were over 5,000 designs available in the library, just right there for your monthly fee. So you can search, you can scroll through and see what they're highlighting. There's more than 100. The new Epic 2 has some ribbon embroidery, so they're highlighting that. We also have a new 260 by 260 square hoop for quilters. That's a 10-inch square embroidery field, so it's showing designs available for that. And more than 5,000 embroidery designs are now in the cloud, or in the library. You can search by words, or if you're looking for a particular technique, for example, if you wanted to see some cross-stitch designs, you can choose that. Or cut work. I love cut work. Let's look at some cut work. So I'm just going to search. And the way you use this with the Brillance is I'm going to come down here and click on this check mark, and that's going to search for cut work designs, and there are 88 of them. So what a cut work design does is it embroiders, and then you have needles or scissors to cut out part of it. So all of these designs are cut work designs, which are really cool. So what I would do to be able to access this on the Brillance 80 is just click on this little heart right here, and that puts it in my library folder. And so when I go back over to the Brillance, that file will show up in that folder. Let me show you a couple of other things you can do. So if you want to search by size, if you want to use a particular size hoop or have a size in mind, you can search by sizes. And then you can also search by animals, different categories like bugs and birds and butterflies. Viking has lovely butterfly designs. I'm going to click out of that children's and go back to the butterflies. And we'll search for those. And you can even, if you don't want too many color changes, or if you want a maximum stitch count, you can filter by that too. And I've got 149 butterfly designs here. And there's all different kinds. So we've got applique, sparkling butterfly. Not sure what that includes. We can actually click in there and get a little more information. So I'm going to click on it, and it shows how many color changes, and there's some metallic thread in there, which is why they're calling it a sparkly butterfly. So there's some good information, tells you what size it is, and you get some access to all kinds of beautiful designs. Okay, so there's that part of it. Then in addition to My Sewnet Cloud, you think that's a lot. Also with this machine, because it's wireless, you can use, there are 3 apps available for the Viking, for the Brillance. One of them is the Joy of Sewing Advisor, which is very similar to the one that I showed you on the machine. So you can look at the stabilizer guide, for example, and see what kinds of stabilizers do what kinds, what they do. Or you can look at the different types of, like free motion quilting, how that works and what you need. So if you're not sure about how to do that, here's a project that tells you how to do it. And if you're out looking for the materials, it has the list of materials right here. So it's really handy. That's the joy of Sewing Advisor. The quick start guide and the sewing instructions are also on here. In addition to that, there is My Sew Monitor. So, and it will let you, as you're stitching, it will let you know. It'll send you a text when you need to change color or thread, or if your thread breaks, or if your bobbin runs out or gets low. So that's an awesome thing. And then there is also a design placement portion of that app, which is really simple to use. And then the last thing I wanted to show you is the Quick Design app. So this is an app where you can take a picture of, oh, I don't know, a child's drawing or a coloring book. I really like to use coloring books with this. There are 3 different types of art that you can create, and you take a picture of it with your phone, and it turns it into stitches. And then right by touching that icon right there, you can save it to your cloud storage and go right over to your machine and stitch it out. So this is the flower and words. So I'm going to type flower words. Whoops. Okay, it's just going to get worse from here, I think. Let's try OR. There we go. And save. And I now have a design that I can go look for. It's been saved to my SewNet. And we can go stitch it out on the embroidery machine. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, those are the apps that are available, and the My SewNet library and the connectivity with the SewNet cloud. And I know that Viking is continuing to invest in this, so we expect to see more options available anytime. All right, thank you and happy embroidering.